Guys, let's get started. Today is Friday, so I'm going to record a quicker, more to the point video, just talking about Bitcoin and Ethereum, okay? So, in the last video, I shared some opportunities in both assets, and I'm going to update you on those and also talk about the next possible moves we might see, all right? So regarding Bitcoin, here's the deal. I shared with you a buy setup around the 103,800 region, okay? So once that position was triggered, it ended up yielding about 3% profit, right? As soon as the price swept that internal liquidity, I took a partial exit. I shared this in the community. I took a partial exit and moved the stop loss to break even. When the price came back to my entry point, it closed my position, right? I had already locked in some profit, okay? As soon as the market swept that internal liquidity, we had the possibility of taking a short at this order block, right? But the price didn't actually mitigate this order block. It just swept the liquidity and made the move. From the moment the market made this downward move, breaking our block and even our low, which is a strong low on the 4-hour chart, okay? Why is that? Because it swept internal liquidity and broke the structure. In other words, it's a strong low. On the 4-hour chart, this low, once it is broken, here shows us that there was a shift, a change of character on the 4-hour chart. And what does this change of character mean? It means that on the daily charts, a pullback movement from the larger range might be starting. In other words, there is indeed a possibility that the price could reach this order block, the 4-hour order block, right? An interesting move for the price, looking at the daily and weekly charts, would even be to sweep this external liquidity, right? But the fact that this red line, this strong low on the 4-hour chart, is actually internal liquidity on the daily chart. In other words, on the daily chart, it's internal liquidity. So it's possible that the market or the price could come down and mitigate this order block, which would also mean closing this large inefficiency, this gap, right? This FVG that was left behind. So it's an order block that can also work for us to trade, okay? So it could happen that the price comes down and makes this downward move, and we might be able to take a buy position within this block, which is between 97,700 and 95,700, all right? If this block breaks, then the price will come and sweep this liquidity, okay? Then after this liquidity sweep, we would take a buy position, okay? But that would be something more extreme, so I won't focus too much on that for now, all right? For now, I'm going to focus on this current range. Within this break, this shock, what can we have here? Okay, so the market swept this liquidity and broke the structure. I could be trading in this zone here, in this supply zone that was left behind. However, the market made a V-shaped recovery, a very strong recovery, right? And even left us here with a BPR. So what could happen within this context, okay? We could still look for a short position in this order block, okay? Placing the stop loss around 110,000 or even 111, right? Which would be a larger stop loss. Or you could set a tighter stop loss, you know, just above the order block. As for my take profit, I could target the extreme block or even the close of the BPR, okay? Yeah, that would be a position you could also trade. Another scenario, right, would be the one I mentioned, the buy position in this order block at 97,700, which would also be an interesting setup, okay? Within the current range of this scenario, you could also choose to trade in this BPR if you wish, okay? This means that as long as you are operating within these specific boundaries, making a trade with this particular BPR is also an available option for you. All right, moving to the 1-hour charts, check the 2-hour chart to see if it's more interesting. Here, look, you could trade this block, okay, let's see. Yes, it would actually be the 4-hour block, together with the closing here of the BPR, right? The BPR would close here, okay? But in this scenario, what would be interesting is if the price made a breakout, right? It would have to break this high here. So it would be something like this. Look, ideally, for it to be a safer buying position, it would be interesting if the price made this move, this breakout, right? This breakout. Since the breakout hasn't happened yet, we could even try to anticipate this buying position, right? Maybe a scalper, yeah, but it's not a very favorable scenario, okay? This buy here is not a very favorable buy, no. It would be an extremely risky buy, okay? Because there was, this break in structure here, even though it broke with a wick. In SMC, we also consider the wick as a break, okay? So the short would be more interesting, but this V-shaped recovery here is also quite complex, okay? So if you want to take a bold risk, you could try taking this setup here, okay? If the price comes back to this region, it would be a setup that you could also trade within the current context, okay? So it would be a possible short in this region and a possible extremely risky long in this region, right? And there's also, right, a slightly more extreme long setup here, okay? Bitcoin is within this context, okay? Other than that, there's not much to do, just wait for the movements. Here's the situation with Ethereum. In the last video, right, I shared the short setup at this order block, the market went there, right? Looking at the 2-hour chart, the market went there, swapped the internal liquidity of the range, but didn't mitigate my block, right? It only closed, right? A BPR that had opened, not even fully closed actually, it just closed an FVG. So it swept that liquidity, right? And made a downward move. So what do we have for Ethereum? After making that liquidity sweep move, it came and swept our internal liquidity on the buy side, right? So the price swept that internal liquidity and mitigated our order block, right? The 2-hour chart order block that I mentioned in the last video, right? A buy position in that order block after the liquidity sweep. So the market swept the liquidity and mitigated the order block, right? Our buy position was placed right on top of the order block, right? It was triggered, okay? And now with 15 times leverage, it's giving a 60% return, okay? It pulled back a bit, right, just now. What do? We set the stop loss at the entry point, right, to eliminate our risk from the position, and we take a partial exit, okay? After this partial exit, we wait for the price to develop further. If the price doesn't move further and comes back to our entry point, it just closes our position. We've already secured, 25% from the partial exit, okay? Now there's a possibility here, which is the following. The price could come up and sweep the liquidity above, okay, this trend line that's being formed here. In other words, it could happen that the price comes to mitigate this block, okay? Let me mark the volume profile here so I can see how this situation looks. Here, look, it would line up right on top, right? The POC would be right on top of this block, okay? So we could also set up a possible short position here, believing that the market would come down, to break this strong low. Since there hasn't been a very clear change of character in this asset yet, because it's accumulating, right, in a sideways range, you could take a position like this, but it's not a very clear setup, okay? But you could take a short position. As for a buy position, the only one I saw was this one, okay? That was the one we managed to catch. So here we're going to keep the position open with equivalent stop loss and make a partial exit, just like that. If the market comes and triggers this short, our stop loss is above and our take profit is down here at this strong support level, okay? If the price breaks through this strong support, which is also an internal liquidity area on the daily chart, we look here, right, at this huge inefficiency that was left behind an interesting region to start building buy positions, okay? But we can clearly see that Ethereum is in a sideways range, right? So let's wait for the price to break out of this accumulation, okay? But the buy setup was really interesting, right? It's working perfectly. There's a possibility to take this short, okay? But it would be a high risk short because we still haven't seen a change of character on the 4-hour chart, right? A more interesting, clearer change of character. But that's fine. Let's wait for the market to move. Guys, please share this video, okay? If you can, join the free community. And if you have the means, join the VIP group, all right? In the next few days, I'm going to open up a spot for private mentoring. If you're interested, just send me a message. and that's it. Let's keep pushing forward. The market isn't easy right now, but there are still some opportunities to be found. Okay, I believe that in the coming weeks we'll have better opportunities. All right, we need to break out of this range so we can get some good moves